Hi. On today's episode, we're going to look at the differences between ketoacidosis, the bad thing, and nutritional ketosis, the very good thing. I have recent examples of both as I was in the hospital over the holidays with ketoacidosis, and I've been on the nutritional ketosis plan for about 6-7 weeks. I provided a few details of my trip to the hospital in episode 1, and today I'd like to go into a little bit more depth on my experience in the hospital with ketoacidosis and compare that to nutritional ketosis. Hi, I'm Steve, and you're watching Keto Steveo. So I'd like to start with the history of diabetes in my family. Both of my grandparents passed from diabetes when my father was 5 years old. Diabetes then skipped my father's generation, and my brother and I both have diabetes. My brother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 21, and I was diagnosed about 5 years ago with type 1. My nephew was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 6. So that's 5 of our family members that had type 1 or have type 1 diabetes. So our family does have a history. Over the years, I haven't been very good at staying on my insulin. I would take off for a few days or sometimes a few weeks at a time without taking insulin. And that was simply because I started gaining quite a bit of weight when I would take my insulin regularly. I recently learned that there's a name for it. It's not a medical condition, but the media has dubbed it diabulimia. It's called diabulimia because many women and young girls will stop taking their insulin in order to lose weight. I didn't realize it was actually called diabulimia, but I was diabulimic. I would intentionally not take insulin for a long period of time so that I would lose weight. That's an extremely unhealthy thing to do and very, very dangerous. So that all culminated over the holidays this year when I was taken to the hospital and diagnosed with diabetic ketoacidosis. So the story begins around Christmas when I had not been taking insulin for about 10 to 12 days. A few days after Christmas, I didn't feel like eating, so I stopped eating. So I'm not taking insulin and I'm not eating. I was drinking fluids but no food. In the middle of the night, around midnight, I started feeling very nauseous and I got up and vomited. And this continued for 6 hours. Every 45 minutes I would go to the bathroom and vomit. And it was not just once, it was multiple times. So I counted up over that 6-hour period about 24 episodes in the bathroom. I knew something wasn't right, but it was 6, 7, 8 in the morning. There wasn't anything I could do about it. Later that morning, I decided to go to a walk-in clinic, so I jumped in the shower to get cleaned up. After being in the shower for about 3 or 4 minutes, I started hyperventilating. I've never had a hyperventilating session. It got so bad that I couldn't even say words. I immediately got out of the shower and asked my wife to call 911. It was now something I didn't want to mess with. So about 20 minutes later, the paramedics showed up. They took all my vitals, including my blood sugar, and they said that I was over 500 on my blood sugar. Their blood glucose meter only tests up to 500, and I pegged the meter. So I was transported to the ambulance where they started an IV, oxygen, and started taking all kinds of vitals. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was in the ER for about 12 hours while they monitored. I was given a saline IV and a potassium IV. They also did a pH blood test, and my pH was 7.0. Normally your pH should be 7.3 to 7.4. My body was extremely acidic with a 7.0. The attending physician in the ER said that I was very lucky, that a few more hours of being in ketoacidosis could have destroyed my liver. After administering a slow and fast-acting insulin, I was transported up to the ICU. I was in the ICU for 2 days where I was under 24-hour care by nursing staff. My blood sugar was tested every 30 minutes around the clock, even during the middle of the night. That's pretty irritating, but they were doing their job, and I know I needed to have it checked. They continued to administer short and long-term acting insulin, and I've never taken short-term insulin before, so they wanted to monitor me closely during this period. I also wasn't allowed food, only an IV drip, so I went about 2.5 days with only an IV drip and no solid food. After 2 days in the ICU, when I became more stable, I was transported to a recovery room, where I spent about 18 hours. I was finally allowed solid food and was off the IV drip, but continued to get IV drips for potassium and slow-acting insulin. The hospital endocrinologist visited me several times and gave me advice on what to do after I got out, and part of that advice was to eat around 60 grams of carbohydrates per meal, 180 grams of carbohydrates per day. I couldn't believe it. I don't understand what it is with the hospitals and some doctors that prescribe a ridiculous amount of carbohydrates. So after being released from the hospital, I came home and decided to research ketoacidosis. I wanted to find out everything I could about it and make sure it didn't happen again. While researching ketoacidosis, I came across ketogenic and the ketogenic diet. And I assume that's because they both start with keto. They're absolutely not related. Diabetic ketoacidosis is extremely dangerous, and only type 1 diabetics can get ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is caused by not taking your insulin, and that raises your blood sugar to an incredibly high level. At one point, I was over 700 on my glucose level. It's similar to ketosis in that your body starts using its fat to produce energy. But the difference is a diabetic doesn't produce insulin. So if you don't take insulin, your body continues to produce more and more ketones until they get to a toxic level. Your blood sugar rises and your pH level lowers continuously until you do permanent damage or you die. In nutritional ketosis, if you're not a diabetic, your body will produce insulin every time you eat. As you go into ketosis, if you're not a diabetic, your body will start turning fat into energy. That's the primary difference between ketoacidosis and nutritional ketosis. One very bad and one very good. Since being released from the hospital, I've been very conscious of my blood sugar levels, and I monitor those throughout the day, 4 to 5 times per day. I also started the keto diet, which reduced my carbs drastically. I was typically taking in around 100 to 140 grams of carbs per day, and now I've been at a level of 10 carbs or less for the last 7 weeks. I've seen my insulin reduced from 75 units a day to 23 units per day. My blood sugar has stabilized. I don't have the roller coaster that I had before I started the keto diet. The other benefits that I've experienced since being on keto are that I have a clarity of thought, a ton of energy, no more sugar cravings, and less stress. And the obvious benefits of losing weight and losing body fat. I'm still learning the keto diet and the ins and outs, and I want to share that journey with you. I hope you'll join me. And don't forget to click that subscribe button if you're enjoying my channel and these episodes. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.